Hey y'all. My name is Russell Etchen and I'm the retail director here at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the release of Isabelle Albuquerque's first monograph, Orgy for 10 People in One Body, published by Pacific, Jeffrey Deitch, and Nicodim. The book, which is a collaboration between Albuquerque and Jon Ray, documents a new series of sculptures by the artist. Each chapter corresponds to one of the 10 sculptures, along with 2 conversations between Albuquerque and fellow artists Arthur Jafa and Miranda July. These expressive and erotic works, rendered in materials ranging from fur, bronze, and walnut, to resin and rubber, are based on the artist's own body. Combining intimate memories with history and mythology, as well as post-humanist and feminist theory, Albuquerque's sculptures become a form of self-portraiture. This afternoon, we're treated to a conversation between Albuquerque, July, Jafa, with moderation by Ariana Reines. Isabelle Albuquerque lives and works in Los Angeles. Her formally powerful and psychologically charged sculptures invites multiple simultaneous readings and creates a cross-temporal conversation that centers the experiences of women and their own connection to desire, sexuality, and embodiment. Miranda July is a filmmaker, artist, and writer from Los Angeles. She has authored the books No One Belongs Here More Than You and The First Bad Man. Miranda wrote, directed, and starred in films such as The Future, Me and You and Everyone We Know, and her latest film, Kajillionaire. Look out for her upcoming novel, All Fours, set to be published in spring of '24. Arthur Jafa is an artist and filmmaker. Jafa's films have garnered acclaim at the Los Angeles, New York, and Black Star Film Festivals, and the artwork is represented in celebrated collections worldwide. In 2019, he received the Golden Lion for the best participant of the 58th Venice Biennale exhibition, May You Live in Interesting Times. Ariana Reines is an award-winning poet and Obie-winning playwright from Salem, Massachusetts. A Sand book, her most recent publication, won the Kingsley Tufts Prize and was longlisted for the National Book Award. In 2020, as a disaffected divinity student at Harvard, she created the Invisible College, a fugitive study hall for sacred texts and poetry, which continues to thrive. An essay collection and The Rose, a novel in verse, is out next year. Join us on stage following the presentation for a unique opportunity to meet the artist. Purchase a copy of the brand new book, of which no one has seen a copy until today, and have it personally signed. Thank you again for coming today and for your support of the MOCA Store program.
Hi, all my favorite people. This is so nice. It is really nice.
As the moderator, hi you guys. I'm going to immoderately just hide in this corner, and these 3 are going to dance and sing for you. And I thought maybe since people haven't opened the book yet, should we just describe it really quickly? So we're here to celebrate this book, Orgy for 10 People in One Body, that the book essentially is recapitulating but also deepening an initiatory experience of sculpture. Well, it appears to be sculpture, but it's actually maybe music, it's actually conjure, it's actually summoning, it's actually sympathetic magic, maybe it's actually also cinema, so many other things. And the book proceeds through the 10 pieces of the cycle, or the 10 phases of the orgy, the 10 bodies, the 10 people in one body. And it's set up kind of in diptychs. And actually the book is also framed by 2 diptychs, which is 2 conversations. And the book has no essay, which is really beautiful. And so that's what the book is. It's extremely exciting and very intimate and unlike anything I've ever seen before. And so I thought maybe you could begin by talking about the way that you met, and maybe give us something of the ongoing conversation, which I know is only shown in a tiny fragment in this amazing book. How do you know each other?
Well, I think maybe I'll start with AJ because we met first. We met about 15 years ago. Jon and I were working on an album that was an homage to all the LA Dreamers, and it was called Paradise, actually. And it was Walt Disney and Karen Carpenter and Kenneth Anger. And we were making a video about Kenneth Anger, and a friend of ours introduced us to AJ. And AJ shot the video, and I remember right when we saw each other, and this is the case with everyone on this stage, and I do have to take a minute and say, my favorite artists are on this stage and in this audience, and to be all in the same room together is totally overwhelming and incredible, so thank you for coming. But actually similar to everyone here, there was this, AJ sometimes calls it alien recognition, but I think we all know this when you recognize someone who's going to change your life forever, and that definitely happened with AJ. And I remember, I don't know if I've told you this, AJ, but I had really struggled being in front of the camera ever, or being in anyone's gaze. Like, my mom will attest to, there's no pictures of me when I'm a kid in family photos, or there's one, but I'm crying and there's like a bloody camera person because I punched him. And I'll always remember when AJ, when I was in his lens, and this was before I knew about Daughters of the Dust, before I knew how seriously he took the gaze, how seriously he took the frame, I felt safe and I felt comfortable and I felt loved. And that was just totally powerful, and began a conversation and a friendship that then, I'm going to jump ahead to how it kind of came into this book, into this body of work. AJ's my mentor, and I think many people think of him that way. You can't be with him without learning and changing, so that's how I feel. And Jon and I worked with AJ on his incredible, what I always call an anti-monograph, a series of utterly improbable but extraordinary renditions. And it's a 1,000-page, we call it not monograph because it's so varied in its content. Jon designed it and made it almost like music, trading fours back and forth between sci-fi and philosophy and images and AJ's work, and we were all working on it in our office. Jon and I were doing AI and design, and we had this little office in Chinatown, and AJ would come, I don't know, every day for a long time, and we'd work on it. And again, this way that he affected me is I just started getting to the office at 4 a.m. and going to the public bathroom in this Chinatown place and mixing plaster. And I just started making sculpture. And it was a pretty intense time. I think we were together the night that Trump got elected. I remember the Women's March, walked by our studio, we'd go out, and I remember looking at it with you and Jon. And it really, that book changed me and will forever change me. It's a book I'll always read, probably, for the rest of my life. And so when AJ was able to then come to my studio and work on my book, it meant the world to me. And yeah, I think it's, it did.
I remember that. I remember you preparing, getting things ready for AJ. And for that conversation, it was a big deal.
I mean, like you said, I met Ez and Jon together. They're my first two friends who really into anything. Who personally were into anything. So, and it's the kind of thing that, I would say people I would never get asked to do something like that. So I was so excited to do it,
I remember.
But so much of, I think, our relationship has just been conversations I've had with these guys have been really incredible. Just can talk about anything. You don't have to footnote yourself when you talk to them. You can go anywhere. dark, light, it doesn't make a difference. So much of it's just hanging out. I mean, like, it's rare, that you find people that you can just hang out. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to have, like, an itinerary. You can just hang out and talk about things. They're both of them. I'm talking about them like they're two. But they are.
And John's right here. We made the book together. Yeah.
They're just connoisseurs of cool shit, And I like to think I'm a connoisseur of cool shit, so it's always fun. And then it's just also too, like, you're constantly hearing things that you never heard, before. It's like there are people who have just been in the world in a certain kind of way. I'm constantly hearing things like, I was mental stuff. I was like, what are you talking about? That's like so crazy to me. But, certainly two of my, handful of closest friends in LA for sure. They always show, I feel like they always show up for me. I try to always show up for them. Like they said, my book, which is, it almost makes me, I'm having a difficult time doing another book now, because they set the bar so high, and not to, shame any other designers I'm working with, but it's just very hard, you know what I mean? So I'm just like, I'm constantly like, well, John, you've done it like that, you know what I mean? So, and even just seeing the book for the first time, which I hadn't really seen, like even when you open it, before you get into the book, it's got this, what's the technical name for the inside? The end papers and the way it wraps around. I don't know if I've ever even seen that before. Not with that intensity of color, but it's just the details and the intensity of it. Like even before I got to the pictures, I'm just sitting there staring at this wraparound of color. I was like, it made me, I was like, damn, I could have done that on mine, but just really, really amazing.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about how I met Miranda now. So we've been actually thinking about this a lot because Miranda's putting out a book, which I'm allowed to say now, called All Fours. And our friendship is a lot in the book. So a lot of people have been asking, like, how did you meet? And I think we have 4 different places we met, but there's another way that's very connected to the orgy that I thought about on the way over. And I remember telling you about this, but sometimes I'm worried I cast a spell to make you be my friend. And I don't know if you remember when I... So right when I started the orgy, I was really, I had been doing performance for 10 years. I was, I'd been doing the sculpture really that did come out at the time of working on AJ's book, but it was pretty crude and rudimentary. And I was kind of lost. I wanted to make sculpture, but I also wanted to make performance. And I remember being real torn between the two. And I remember speaking to my friend Math, because I got this saxophone, and I was like, Math, I want to play this. I want this to be an ensemble. I want this to be a musical piece called Orgy for 10 People in One Body, but I also want to make a sculpture. And I remember Math said, do both. And that was like, kind of became something I said to myself again and again, do both, do both, do both. But because of the nature of the work and because I kind of take a little bit of a method approach to the sculpture, I decided I would try and practice some sex magic, which I had never done before. And I made a sigil, and with a sigil you're supposed to have just one symbol for one thing that you try to conjure, but I had both, and it was the sculpture and performance. And I remember, like, at the moment of climax or orgasm in this particular spell, there was an earthquake. And I was like, oh no, this is my first time ever trying magic, right? I was like, fuck. And then I walk out the door, and there's a dead owl on my studio stoop. And I was like, I'm gonna die. Sure, like, what did I do? Why did I get into this? This is terrible. I went home. I don't know if I told you, John, I was so freaking terrified. And I fell asleep. I was really scared because there was literally an earthquake and then a dead owl. And I was like, oh, okay. Fell asleep, woke up the next day alive. And Miranda wrote me. Well, 2 things happened. Sarah Sitkin, who I did the first 6 sculptures in the orgy with, wrote me and said, hey, let's do the body cast you want to do. And Miranda wrote me and said, do you want to be in my film? And I was like, oh my God, it's sculpture and performance. And I was so happy. And this, well, I don't know if we, sorry, I'm seeing Ben Lee, because then after that, I went to go see Trans World the same day. And I remember I was feeling so high. I was like, I'm going to be in Miranda July's film. This has not come out, though we had a blast making it. And it was all in my studio. It was very special. And I'm going to work with Sarah. It's going to be great. And I remember saying to Ben Lee, like, I want to make this sculpture. It's laid in the swan, but the swan's a saxophone. And mostly because I was feeling really high. And Mihai had these, like, cigarettes. He's the only person left in LA who smokes. We were smoking. And Ben Lee said, sure. And I was like, oh, okay. So that kind of started the orgy. And from then on, partially because we were working on the film, Miranda was working on her book and I was working on the sculptures. And for a while, she came to the studio every Sunday for hours. And we were really transforming ourselves and trying to, in that feeling, we were transforming the world and really kind of stretching our relationship and what we were doing with our work. And we've done that. We did that for 4 years. And now we're both putting out these books, and I'm so happy to be in each other's work in that way, though I don't think we thought it was that. We were just supporting each other through really, that kind of transformation can be really painful. So to be in it together was, I don't think I could have done it without that.
Yeah, I've never had that where like you meet someone where we're both at the beginning of like kind of just a really huge body of work for both of us. And like we're there right at the start, just dumb as can be, totally like, what, help, and just met consistently through the whole thing, sometimes years because of the pandemic where we didn't see anyone else. It was just us. And it was kind of wild. Just a few days ago, you came over. It was like a book exchange. It was just crazy timing because, but really, my book's dedicated to her. I just started looking at the book, but it really is. It's kind of like the way your sculptures are more excellent than they have any business being, especially for, this is like your first major body of work, not your first time making excellent things, obviously, and it is, I think that's like, oh, you feel like, oh, this is old and deep because you can't, anyone who's been making work is like, that's not normal or safe even. There's like something that makes you a little uneasy about like imagine if these things you're seeing on the screen, that's your first stuff, like what? Yeah.
Just curious, Miranda, were you conscious of having been summoned by sex magic and earthquake?
I told you, I was so worried.
Oh,
I was like, do you still want to be my friend? I was you don't want to,
There was a lot of magic-y it was in keeping. There was a whole, it's going to get really kinky sounding if I just elaborate on that. But the first thing I ever asked her to do was I yelled across a long table of people. Jon was there. And I didn't know you, really. I'd been like, do you want to do a lingerie photo shoot with me? Which was
and I was a never nude, by the way, my whole life. So this, you wouldn't think that now.
Oh yeah. I didn't know this. Super buttoned up, not
never nude.
Never nude. But it was like a job I'd somehow gotten myself into,
Andrea was there too, I think.
Oh, at the dinner? No. Okay. It was for Mike. Yeah.
I don't know why I think it, but I remember going,
yes.
Yeah. It was all day. It was our first hangout. Yeah. So it was, you see, I wasn't thrown off or anything by the sex magic.
Yeah, the sex magic was after that. Yeah.
That makes it sound so hurt and bourgeois. I want to keep talking about magic. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting here thinking as these guys were talking, like why do I, like the sense of identification, like my own, I have a very particular, maybe some people know, a very particular trajectory, I would say, maybe a late bloomer in certain respects, but so much of it to me is about what are the conditions that make it possible to emerge, let's say. And I think a lot of my conversations with Iz and with Jon have always been about a certain kind of potentiality and how do you get at it, you know. And blocks, you know. Like I feel like I'm a person that sort of struggle with blocks, if you want to call it. But and like how do you get around them? And my experience has been there's like a very small, like I said, handful of people who I could say almost anything and they were just willing to just go there with me. But also too, you know, like everybody wants people around them who are encouraging, but you also want people who are like super critical. It's a fine line because you don't want people who are like, they're just rah-rah. You know, it's not just like non-critical supportiveness. It's more like, almost sometimes it's less what people say than how they're activated by a concept or idea and how they pass it back and forth. That's why I think it was so interesting to start off with the Kenneth Anger thing, because I think, you know, for a filmmaker, he's like the only, well, maybe Harry Smith in a certain kind of way too, but when I think of a person who made art that was truly about catalyzing things, and creating energy, and creating, you know, like Butowski says, verticality and all these kinds of things, I think of Kenneth Anger, so I feel like that was such an interesting place to sort of, you know, rendezvous in a way, or cross paths initially. And everything, like, because I shot a number of things for you guys, the thing with Devendra, you know, they always were in this whole space of like a kind of Foucault limit experience, you know, like, you know, they skirt like bondage, domination, power, all these kinds of things. Like in the Devendra video, this is a black guy. You know, this is like again, like I said, nobody ever asked me to do anything like that. It's like people say, "Oh, Daughters of Dust," and then anybody who knows me would just laugh and say, "Well, AJ is a freak." You know, he's just like basically a freak. It's not. It's just hard to access it as a black person too, in a strange kind of way for me. So it was such a weird. It's like you're an alien. Like sometimes I say, like, you know, like we're saying the alien familiar thing. It's like you're an alien, and you meet other people who don't look anything like you, but it's like under the skin or something. You know, if you strip it down, you're all an alien under that. And it's not about not being black, not being white. It's nothing like that. It's just on a core level, there's something. It's kind of hard to put your finger on, but it's like, to me, the base. And I keep going back to this idea of emergence. Like, so when you first said, "Hey, come over and let's talk," you know, the first thing, and even when I just glanced in the book, what I was really conscious of, like Miranda saying, these are your first things, and on a certain level, like, it's weird that they're, you know, so actualized, but when you see the density of thought around them, and you can see that in your studio, and I can see that a bit in the book as well, you know. Like, is the only person I know who's cut stuff out that would be the centerpiece of anybody else's thing. Like the first time I saw the transcription of our conversation, there were things I was like, "Is, what happened to that?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't know. I just want to take." I was like, "That's some mythic shit. you have to include that. You can't cut that out, you know." But it's just, I mean, I think it speaks to. I don't even know if the right word is depth of thought or this breadth of thought, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's always like, you know, I remember when we were talking at one point, I was like, I don't know if I should say this because it's going to seem so over-determined, but I think we have to talk about the witch thing, you know? It just seems, I was like, you know, female artists, maybe it's a little too over-determined, but it just seemed impossible to kind of not get around it, because it is about conjuring. It's about making work that activates spaces and people in front of them. When you stand in front of them, you know, they always give me, you know, a very particular kind of feeling. You know, I love the little lady. I always feel like very charged when I stand in relationship to it, you know, as an artifact.
That is the hope with the work that, and I know we talked about this, but that it does have a kind of charge, and I always want it to feel really alive. So there is a lot of things that go into bringing it that kind of life. And for me, the sculpture saved my life. Like I did have a lot of blocks, and we've all known each other so long. We've helped each other through a lot of that, and I had pretty much like shut down my body. I had and we talked about this, and it's one of the things. Yeah, I had when I was a young person, I had like my chest was like half male, half female. Like I had one breast, which I to this day still don't know anyone else who has that experience, but. Recently, and she might be here, a friend of mine told me that she knows someone else's mom who has that. But it was a really isolating experience. I had just one breast. So it gave me a real insight into, like, I went right into myth with the Amazons. Like I could really relate right away. And there was ways that I was able to enter mythology really easily. And when I was around 36, I didn't really like totally go through. I just shut down my body, like I didn't know what to do, and I had a surgery, so I have a cyborg breast and a real one, it just, I don't know, I just left my body, and then when I started working on this work, it forced me to re-enter it, and there was a lot of shame, and I was really scared. But they saved my life, like with the little sculpture that will live with AJ. I slept with her for 3 months. Like she healed me. And sanding her, like there is something in sympathetic magic, like sanding her and oiling her, like I was able to, it is, in some ways it's a transmutation of my own body that I couldn't even look at. Like I couldn't see it, it was a blur. I could see my face, but I could never see my body. So I had to, this is something AJ really taught me about looking. I always remember I was taking a photo once and you said, it was one of the best art things you ever said. You said, get closer. And so much of it is just looking and looking at the thing you're afraid of. In my case, it was just my body. I was really afraid of it. And so, trying to make it alive and really looking at it and what it means through time and what it means through our historical time and what it means in the shifting nature of bodies. Every meaning is changing so quickly right now. So what does it mean in the context of all that?
It's fascinating that you say you could see your face, but not your body, because of course these pieces don't have heads.
Which was such a release for me. Yeah, because I would lived so in my head. And I think that's why I wanted them also to feel orgasmic, that moment where you can stop thinking for a second and be in the power of your body. That was just a total dream for me. And they're so feminine, like I was yearned to be like a full woman, so I got to really, really connect to the divine feminine, and we did a lot of work around that, but really like bring all that desire into them in a way that I didn't really even understand and that I still am trying to figure out.
Is sculpture always sympathetic magic? Somehow, or is it always somehow funerary or resurrectionary?
Gosh, I don't know. What do you? I always think. Yeah, what do you guys think?
Is sculpture like always funerary? Is it always sympathetic magic? Is it always resurrectionary? Like, is it always somehow threshold magic?
Maybe figurative sculpture is. Maybe when you're transmutating the body through multiple materials, and with these works, I go through multiple processes. So the body usually starts with my own, then goes sometimes to wax, to CNC, to like it goes. I try and go through many, kind of like the passing back and forth between hands that AJ was referring to, which I learned to do from him, that you never just keep it in your own hands. You pass it back and forth so that the objects can have power of the fingerprints of multiple people and of the relationship. So, yeah, maybe with figurative sculpture, it would be hard for it not to. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the witch stuff and just trying to remember, like, what was all the things we talked about, and I'm remembering how much shame there was. Like, we had shame about, like, could we want the things we wanted? Could we exist as the women we were and not be somehow sort of cast out, speaking of which is like, and of course that's like no one, on some level, no one cares. Then on another level, like we're feeling that for real old reasons, we're not crazy. And so like to fight that on the inside to the degree that you not only make work, but like change your life, through doing that. It is like it's magical, but I think for me, the like deepening that came in the time we were talking together was like, that's all we're doing with art. Like we're changing our life. We're doing it at the highest possible stakes, and it is a ritual, and it's not a fake ritual. It's not a picture of a ritual. It is actually doing something. And by that I mean that's so abstract. Like what? But I guess I mean when you're doing something where you have to have faith again and again, and you're kind of forsaken. Like what the hell? Really lost now, not just like, is this bad, but am I bad? Is the whole system I'm working in bad? Is it, and then to sort of like create your path or your meaning just out of just sort of sheer devotion, like finding like a thread that's true enough to hold you, even if there's no recognition of it in the world,
Totally. I think it's funny now being done with it, and now the book is a whole other thing, but there was about 4 years where every day I woke up and I was just like, to serve the orgy, like what do I do? I would wake up at 3 a.m. I had a full-time job, I'd get to the studio, like, how do I serve the orgy? And in some ways that was deep for me. In many ways, right when I started the work, I come from 4 generations of women artists, and we lost all the objects in our family in a fire. So I was like, and I was, I wasn't a visual artist, I was a performer, but what I thought my life would be is caring for my grandmother's art, my great-grandmother's art, my mom's art, my sister's art. And then suddenly that caretaker role was ash. So it kind of switched into something else, like all that energy that I had kind of devoted thinking, I'd do that until I died kind of thing, turned into something else. Like, how do I continue that line? Somehow it's connected to the devotion. It was a devotion to my family. It was a devotion to every woman I love, and not just women, though I was focusing there most of the orgy. It was about, like, it was a devotion to being a corporal human, which in my day job, I was working on AI all day, and pretty sure that this was maybe the last generation that would experience sexuality or a corporal experience the way we do. So I felt really, called to work on it every minute in a kind of insane way. I'm so sorry to pretty much everyone here.
Because I realize when you look at these, you're like, how were these made? And I think if I hadn't been alongside you, I wouldn't have known how, like, they're not made for you, you're not like, how many times did I hear about like the patina, this and that, like things going wildly wrong and like workarounds and things like that. I don't know if there's a way to talk about that stuff, but I got so much out of hearing about the process.
Yeah, the process was really amazing, and it involved a lot of people. So it begins, for most of these sculptures, and we talk about this in the book, but it would begin in my studio, and I call it the drawing process. And no one likes when I say that, I don't understand when I say that, but I'm using my body to draw. So I have a mirror, a camera set up, and I'm sometimes for months, like in a rehearsal kind of process or a drawing process, finding the form. And I know, like, they're all real simple, almost cliches, most of them. But it's when you hit the form, it takes a long time for it to become a metaphor and for it not to become a flat metaphor. So there's a lot of dance to get there, a lot of dancing. So I'm doing that. Once I get there, my sister, who's an actual dancer, and I think she's here somewhere. Yes, there she is. And she understands the body in a whole other way. So then she works with me to really articulate, like the curled toe of the orgasm, the twist of the back. We work together to do that part. And then each one, because they're all a different material, and a lot of times it's each sculpture in the orgy is a different material and requires a different process. So after that kind of in my studio process, it changes. And it's either a life cast or a scan, different types of scans, and then different kinds of transmutations depending on the material. And I always want, like, the goal is that it feels alive, but also that it kind of sings. So the patina thing, like, a lot of times there's a lot of ways to get there. You know, sometimes it's in a full moon in the pond with the broom and, you know, trying to get the witch to come through, you know, and sometimes it's inventing a wood carving machine out of a rifle carver or whatever it is to bring that, I guess to make it sing. That's the only way I know how to say it. It's like you can hear it when it starts to work, but it takes a long time to get it to sing. It sounds so cheesy, I know. But
you hear voices too, don't you?
Yeah, and we talk about that in the book too. And I feel really lucky, not in a way that, because that can be really scary for a lot of people. It's not like that so much. Like I feel my family with me all the time, and they speak to me, and I hear singing a lot. I feel I'm more connected to. And Wally's here, who will know, we've had a lot of conversations about this. I do feel more connected to the people. No, it's people before and after, and I can hear them singing a lot. And there's a lot of sculptures that I go and visit pretty religiously, where I can feel the people who made it, and I can hear their voices in the sculpture. Like there's a way that objects can hold I'm using the word song, but that feels limited for what I mean, our language, our culture in an object. And I'm trying to connect to that, you know, in that same, like a call and response through time. So one person puts out a song, maybe it's an ancient sculpture from Mexico City. Okay, let me do the call and response back and forth.
Some deep shit. I'm just like sitting here, like, you know, listening. It's funny. It's like I was gonna say one of the things that's been interesting to see in terms of is just like I have this thing sometimes I say like ill sons and daughters, which to me is like it's the opposite of like anxiety of influence. It's a kind of somewhat tension-ridden belonging relationship to people other than yourself, like and how you have to negotiate. Like I know, like again, like I met Jon and Iz together, so I've seen how intricate and complicated it is to collaborate with a person and then to, without rejecting the person, find your own path. And like with, you know, having a mom like Lita who's an artist and, you know, incredible and all that, how do you find your own path in relationship to people who are close to you, who are like in you know, in your body? It's such a delicate and intricate thing to do. Sometimes, like I say, it's the difference between a creative gesture and a procreative gesture. Like there's a lot of creative gestures, and those are cool, but the procreative gestures are more powerful when you can get to them because it means you didn't just make a thing that has a function you can drink out of it. You made a thing that when other people see it, like punk rock, you know, when you see it, you feel like, oh, I could do that too. Even if, you know, it's like your thing has a kind of surface, epidermal level of simplicity. Right. You know what I mean? That draws people in. Oh, that's like something my grandmother would have had on a shelf or something, like a tchotchke, you know, right. Or something like that. But like a tchotchke is such a powerful, like, you know, everybody understands a person's relationship to a tchotchke. It's like, to me, supersedes an art relationship to an art artifact. If I went into my grandmother's house, she had like the classic Niagara Falls ashtray. Right. You know, because it's, you know, that's her and my grandfather went to Niagara Falls, which I would have never guessed. But she had a series of artifacts that were just always there since the moment I was conscious. They were always there on her shelf, and it's like, oftentimes I feel like in art, particularly contemporary art, it kind of, even though that seems like a simple, very class, you understand, and on a high class level, it's hard to make your things do that. And that's one of the things that I felt like when I walked to the show in New York, you know, it was like, oh, they are moving into the procreative zone, not just being in the creative zone. Nothing's wrong with creative, obviously, but procreative. It's a magic thing, again, just to get back to the magic.
I'm thinking about a lot of things, but thinking about your grandma's ashtray, and, you know, so many of the bodies in the orgy are, you know, in collision with an object that we all know: teddy bears, brooms, saxophones, and our relationship to them, the witch takes the thing that binds her, rides it to her freedom, and how that brings a kind of reality to it. But really what I've been trying to do with sculpture since I started is I wanted to create, and I think it was really influenced by Jon, my partner, who was working with AI, and he always wanted his work to speak back to him. And I wasn't necessarily looking for the work to speak back, but I didn't want to have a subject-object relationship. Like here, I'm looking at this piece of work, that's the object, I'm the subject. I wanted to have a subject-subject relationship. So how do you do that? And sometimes an ashtray can activate that because it brings you to grandma, you know, so that, that's something I'm always trying to kind of get to. I don't know if that's connected to the procreation. I'd like to actually understand the procreation versus creation a little bit better. Will you break it down?
No, I just mean like the best art to me is art that makes people think like they could just do it themselves.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So you can see something like some art I stand in front of and I say that's magnificent, but I don't think for a second I can do it myself.
Right.
Like hip hop and has that punk rock.
Well, anyone, I mean, what's so great with working with your own body? We all got this, you know. This is definitely something we can all do.
It's kind of visceral, like even the whole thing of the funeral relationship. It's like, you know, like you said, it's funny, like you said, I've never heard anybody ever say that. You know, object-subject relationship. I just want to be a subject in relationship to the subject. It's like I even have other like complicated ideas in my head about like you've heard a version of this, a short version of it. It's like, oh, like if you have African art and when it comes in the context of Western art practice, it's a thing. But one of the things that I think like Picasso and those guys they saw immediately is like the object-subject relationship is very, very different.
Totally.
In the African artifact, you know, and even if you take like Duchamp, like I feel like the Cubists basically they saw the formal implications of it, and that's what Cubism comes from. Oh, you're talking about an artifact like Robert Farris Thompson talks about, just being looked at from multiple vantages at the same time, and that's encapsulated in the body of the artifact. But when Duchamp saw it, I think he just was said, everybody else was preoccupied with like what it looked like, and he was kind of preoccupied with how it was behaving.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, you put these black artifacts in this white space, it produces a certain kind of energy that's grounded in their kind of radical alienation from the context. But it produces energy. So Duchamp, I think, he made his optical versions of it, you know, doing this and he made those paintings. But then he took a step back and said, yeah, this is interesting, but more interesting is like the energy these things are producing in space. I think that's where the Europe came from.
Right.
You're just like, what kind of thing can I put in this context that can generate that kind of energy? And I feel like, when I saw your work, I feel like it is, even when you said the subject thing, I was like, yeah, precisely, because it's like a thought that never occurred in my head, but it's like, I think the basis of the kind of energy that they do.
For me too. You know, I think of them like my daughters. I don't think of them like sculpture. They're alive. And like anything that's alive, they're communicating with everything around them. One piece that got cut out of our conversation was when you were telling about the Bamyan sculpture. Yeah, Bamyan sculpture. And I think about that a lot, where people who prepare their entire life from the moment they're born to make the sculpture, and what the sculpture looks like really has nothing to do with anything. They've been taking hallucinogenic drugs and preparing their body to create what seems like a simple object for their life, and you can feel their life in the object. Yeah, and that's, yeah, I think what we all aspire to do in some way. Yeah.
There's a there's a poetic cliche to correlate or maybe footnote to this, which is the Rilke poem, The Archaic Torso of Apollo. Of course, it has no head, and the last two lines are, "For here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life." And it's completely cheesy for me to quote this, but for me, that's the essence of being seen and the opposite of surveillance in a way. It's also the essence of this aliveness that you're talking about that can exist in objects, but that's totally not the way this necro-fascist capitalism teaches you to relate.
It has nothing to do with the way it looks. Yeah,
Right,
I'm always
right.
trying to get that. That's such a precise way to say it. That's just really kind of beside the point.
Yeah.
It's the way it feels. Yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah.
It's convenient that it doesn't have a head.
Well, that makes it a lot easier to enter into, I think. Yeah.
I just realized probably part of my job is to keep time, and I have no idea. What time?
I think it's right around time we should try to take some Q&A.
All right then.
Questions?
Yes. Hi, Isabelle. I would love so much to hear about your performative creation process and also your interspecies work that you've done in order to produce this body of work.
Yeah. So this will be a way to talk about how kind of some of the sculptures happen. If I talk about like the deer, for example. So that piece was right at the height of, right when we all got into lockdown and pandemic. I was listening on repeat to this Arvo Pärt song called The Deer's Cry, which is, I listen to a lot of like medieval music, and this is a prayer about people transforming and able, in order to transcend a difficult moment. So I'm thinking about transformation, obviously, a lot in here, and I think we all know we need to transform right now. So I was thinking about that a lot, like how can I transform? And just maybe because I was listening to that track, I'm a little bit obsessive. I maybe listened to it 1,000 times in a week or two, I don't know, however long we were locked in. And I started thinking about the deer as a protective prayer. So in that case, it sounds funny, but part of the process is it is like a method process. I ate deer food. I lived in a cave. I waited for the deer in Griffith Park. I really tried to connect to my deerness, and all of them are also about an aspect of sexuality, and that's like the fawn or the gentle aspect that, if anything, is maybe a lot more vulnerable than some of the tougher ones. And so, yeah, I don't know if it was performative. It was like getting into a character before doing the scan, so that I could bring her, the deer, to the piece. Yeah, I don't know if that answers. Yeah, great.
Hi, congratulations.
Thank you.
The sculptures are so beautiful, and they all look like their own little sigils, actually. And my question is about the owl, actually, because you all were speaking a lot about myth. You're telling the story, but I wonder how you have, what is the myth of the owl when you recount your first time with sex magic and creating this symbol?
Such a good question. I was so freaked out. I think I never thought about the owl again until driving over here, being like, oh no, that's why she's my friend. That's how I got her. I don't know. Do you know about the myth of the owl?
Well, you can reflect on it and really feel it. I would love to talk after.
Great. So would I.
A big part of your journey, like owls are messengers from the spirit world, and you were afraid of the death, that you were going to die. It's not that you were going to have a physical death, but more of a mental and spiritual one. You have reached this part of your life where you said you were afraid to be photographed, and then the next day this person reaches out to you, and then they eventually ask if you will be okay being photographed in lingerie, and you're like, yes. It was that part of you that was afraid to be seen is now no longer serving you, so she gets to die so that this new you can emerge. Again, that's just my interpretation of it.
No, totally. That was great. Yes. When I was first putting together the slideshow, it was like thousands of images, because That's how I do it first. And I was putting together all the photos of the first scan, which was Sarah who called the next day too. And I was looking at it, I was like, oh, I wish I had the pictures actually. It's a death and a birth in one. And that's really what the whole orgy is. It's a death and a birth. And I can't not say that at the beginning of the orgy, we had the death in my family of the objects, but my sister also had a child and I was at the birth. And sometimes I think it's just me trying to process her birth, because she was in every position. Like I still see her in my mind, like every position. It's so intense. I haven't totally processed it, but a lot of it is processing, seeing a birth of someone I love. Yeah, but also birthing myself. Yeah, totally. I'm gonna. Yeah, we talk after.
Oh, somebody raised their hand over there.
Patients always a good thing, and kind of related to my question. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your mindset and how it felt in talking about the feeling versus the image of your work and work in general. I'm wondering if you can talk about the mindset and how you felt during the first part of this creation process while your body was being translated into these material objects, and sort of how that felt for you.
Madness. I don't know, I felt pretty fucked up for a while. And then it did, yeah, it was really painful. You're very familiar with it. What would you say? I mean, it was pretty painful.
I don't know. Yeah, hard days.
Yeah, hard to answer. But also ecstatic. I mean, both of it. There was also a lot of ecstasy. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to answer it.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
The work allows you to. I'm lucky. I remember feeling lucky every day. The work allows you to deal with it. I mean, there's nothing I could be more grateful for. Couldn't survive without that, really.
Sometimes when we meet, we'll be saying like all these really hard things. I mean, literally it could be like, house burned down, this person died, da, da, da. But like the energy still seems up. And then at the very end, be like, but I had a good work day. And it's, and then, Isabelle will be like, or one of us will be that person. And it's such a, like,
it's true.
It's kind of doesn't, you can really get through a lot.
If you get the work done in the day, everything else can be okay.
Well. Yeah. And the opposite is true also. Things can look like they're so great. Everything's coming up roses, and you're like, it's not working.
Right.
And I probably never will. Right. That's the feeling.
Kind of tangential, but related to work. You said you were working on AI as your day job while you were doing this work, and that you think it's the last generation that people will experience somatic erotics in that way. And I was curious about what you mean or what you know that we don't know.
Well, the cool thing is that it's so much more part of culture now. When we were doing it, it was kind of just us. Like, people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? It was so strange that we were doing it. Now I feel like it is here, and maybe not. I think it's going to be pretty transformative. I did the databases, so like the year of the orgy, this was before DALL-E, or you could just kind of, put in some information, get things back. We had to, I saw myself as like the mother of the AI. So Jon was building it and working with it, and I was training it. So, for example, we tried to see if it could paint nudes, which now all of us can, which is great. But at the time, it was there was a huge gap between what it could do and what we think of as a nude. And you had, as the mom, or how I saw myself, it had to see at least like 300,000 nude photos or images. So it was about going through from, like, I think I spent 6 months looking at every piece of art that nude art, so sculpture and all the way up to photography. So that had like a huge effect. And of course, looking at it and be like, no women made any of this. That is as silly as that sounds. I wanted to make some kind of shift there. I wanted to show my baby AI, like, look at what it's like when we make it. It has a different thing, and that was part of it too. I think maybe I'm more optimistic now that we'll keep our experience, but I can't imagine that like any of our children will relate to sexuality or the body the way we do. I don't think they can.
Wait, can I triangulate to that?
Please.
Okay, so, because while you were saying that, I was just thinking of all those fucked up, weird, like, 15th century nudes by men who'd never seen a naked woman, where it weirdly looks like a guy, or it's just like...
It's half their wife, half the midwife, half...
Right, it's like this weird composite, like they haven't seen enough naked women either, right? And then when you say, like, whatever, the next generations won't have sexuality like we do, but we don't have it like they had 2 generations ago either.
True.
So what if that just changes really fast?
Maybe totally.
And another thing. No, but I mean, it's just so interesting to me that also AI gave you back your body, though.
Right.
I mean, it didn't just give it to you. You had to make it do that for you.
But I did stop that work and pretty intentionally and put my hands in clay because I knew that that was not going to work for me. And that was hard. That was our livelihood and everything. So I wanted to return to the human. And a lot of the work too, I wanted it to be so precise because I don't feel so strongly about this now, but I really thought it was like maybe future alien intelligences would not really know what the human body even looked like. So I wanted to be real precise about everything, and really was thinking about with the scans and real precise about what it feels like, at least for this one, in this moment.
That's so writerly, actually. In the way of trying to preserve something against oblivion for the visiting aliens so that they'll understand.
Yeah.
Sorry, could I do one more? I know there's people in the audience. Oh, damn it. I'll ask you later. I'll ask.
You have a lot of voice.
Well, I think it's really interesting that AI also made you go through so much art history, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask. I think the beautiful thing about your work is the incredible complexity, the layering of so many different influences from the materials to myth, but also to the art historical. And each piece, if I'm right or wrong, is based on some art historical reference. And so I just wanted you to talk about that.
Right. So not all of them are, but I'm really interested in cliche, and I'm really interested in images that get made over and over and over again, partially probably from working with Jon and looking at nudes as an AI. So I'm looking for patterns, right? And there are these images that happen again and again. Leda and the Swan is one. And the first sculpture in the Orgy is a recreation of Leda and the Swan. Harry Mary, the Virgin Mary, when she sprouts hair to hide her shame, we see that image again and again and again. So part of it is just wanting to get into rhythm with that song, and to contribute to that really long song. But not all of them are art historical. But I think it did come from looking for those patterns and also wanting to create a feral timeline, okay, yeah, here's this art historical timeline, cool, like there's literally no women making any of our own bodies, right? To a certain point, to the 60s. And how can we make a feral timeline? How can we take the technology of Christianity, affective piety, all these incredible technologies of art, and use that to talk about a slightly different perspective, or a perspective that comes from inside the body out as opposed to outside the body in?